Hey, it's Sloth here. I'm so glad you came by. I'll get the kettle brewing while we get caught up. For today's video, we're going to be designing some furries based off of viewer-submitted emojis. I asked you guys over on Instagram to send in 4 emojis, including an animal for this challenge, and you delivered. Mandatory self-promotion plug, this video was also voted for on Instagram, so follow me over there if you want to be able to vote on future videos or submit suggestions. Okay, promo over. I wanted to learn how to draw furries properly because I thought it'd be fun to give some of my OCs for sonas in the future. Some of them just radiate such specific animal energy that it's hard to resist, but I want to be able to do them justice. And I've got some species in my fantasy settings which are humanoid animal creatures that I want to get better at drawing too. Also, I do offer anthro commissions, and I've done a couple for various D&D characters in the past, and I probably will again, so I want to make sure I'm keeping on top of that skill so it doesn't lag too far behind my human drawing skills, or that I'm only practicing it when I have a commission, and it's always good to have a big portfolio of diverse types of characters you could draw. With that explanation out of the way, let's get straight into the designs. Our first set of emojis for this video is a pufferfish, a croissant, an orange, and a pink bow. Obviously we're making our animal emoji dictate what kind of furry we're drawing, but apart from that it's free range on how to include them. Our remaining emojis all felt very cutesy and girly, so I decided to make this pufferfish girl dress in Lolita fashion with some naval influences, since you know, she's a fish. I've been on somewhat of a technical practice kick recently, so I wanted to continue that with this pose by doing perspective work. I've been doing life drawings most days since December. I've started doing them as a warm-ups, and I feel like my anatomy has really improved for it. I'm even getting better at muscles. I mean, look at these muscles, guys. So I wanted to kind of push myself and see how much I've improved and where needs work by going into a more challenging pose in perspective, and because I don't really practice perspective as much as I really should. I went with a cutesy anime girl falling towards the camera pose. I like the idea that because she's a fish out of water, she's clumsy on her legs and trips a lot. I also thought that her dropping a croissant would be more visually interesting than her just holding it. Perspective work definitely isn't within my comfort zone just yet, and I spent like a good hour and a half on just the sketching of this pose. I was definitely having flashbacks to Rupert's arm from my Two Princes video with this one. I just kept feeling like something was off, but I couldn't quite figure out what. Not sure how much of my confusion will end up showing in the speed paint, but I was fighting for my life over here. At a certain point I just decided to call it good enough and hope the clothes would hide any of the wonky bits. It was a fun challenge though, and I do feel like my anatomy studies paid off with this one. Like, it was hard, but not nearly as big a struggle for me as it would have been probably even 3 months ago. There's definitely room for improvement though, and it's an area I need to practice more often to get less wonky at. Like, the leg she's standing on isn't quite at the correct angle. I think it could have done with being slightly more pointed towards the viewer. For her actual design, I wanted to integrate the oranges in her outfit so that it was more subtle than making her whole design bright orange. So I gave her a sailor collar that's patterned to look like little orange slices. Though I think they may have ended up looking more like grapefruits. On a whim, I decided to draw all of these in CMYK instead of my usual RBG. If you're not familiar, essentially for our purposes, the short explanation is that you can't get as highly saturated colours in CMYK. The benefit is that it's closer to printing colours. So I couldn't make her oranges as bright as I usually would have. Though I think the fact that these colour palettes had to be more pastel did help unify them, and it took a lot less fiddling around with hues and saturations and the like than usual. The main problem I had was that I'd sketched up their designs on RBG canvases before I decided to switch over, so I had to play around with their palettes a little more than I usually would have from sketch to the final, to make them look good in the new colour settings. Actual art tip here. I tend to add a little arrow to show where my light is coming from when I'm doing line art, so that I remember where it is the whole time. Making lines closer to light thinner and ones in shadow thicker is a really simple way of upping your line art game, and it can add a lot of subtle depth to a piece. Her beret has an orange clip in it with swoopy leaves coming out of it to help add some visual interest and make sure her head has some potential for movement, even though she is incredibly bald and has no hair to sway in the wind. I've never played Genshin Impact, but her little leaves and the beret kind of remind me of that one guy with the shorts and the harp that everyone draws. I couldn't even tell you what he has in his beret by memory, but I've seen so much art for that game that sometimes I make a character design choice and my brain automatically goes, oh yeah, like that one guy from Genshin. I don't know what this means, but now you've got a peek into the way that the phantom art space online has permanently damaged my psyche, I guess. Her irises are shaped like orange slices, though it's kind of hard to see them from a distance. and she herself is orange to keep on brand. I based her off of this image of a pufferfish, which Google tells me is a fugu pufferfish, which apparently have very toxic livers and ovaries, so there's your fun fact of the day. I upped the orange on her compared to the reference picture, and made her be all puffed up, because regularly pufferfish just look like normal fish, if a little odd shaped, so of course I had to go with the more recognisable look for her. Maybe she's all puffed up because she's shocked that she's dropped her croissant. I do dread to think what she'd look like not puffed up though. I think she might end up looking like a shriveled up raisin. She's covered in little brown and white spots like the reference, which I struggled a little with. I feel like they may have ended up looking like a weird skin condition rather than patterning. Maybe I should have made them symmetrical instead. I don't know if that would have made a difference, but it feels like it would have. I don't know, furries in the comments let me know. From her chin to her underbelly she's white, and so is the inside of her little thin ear thing. I gave her a knee-length dress with a big puffy skirt, and her petticoat sticks out the bottom. In her original design, this was to imitate the white lining on oranges, but I ended up changing her design away from that, so now it's just there because it's cute. Originally her dress was meant to have scallop segments at the bottom like this, to look a bit like orange slices, but in practice they just looked odd, so I ended up taking them out of the final design. I think they could have worked in a different pose, but with the one I went with they just didn't feel like they fit. Shape language wise, we're going with very soft circular shapes on the whole, since I wanted her to be cutesy, and pufferfish are literally just a circle, so it was the obvious choice. Our remaining emoji is a pink bow, which I used to decorate her dress where it felt fitting. In my original colour plan, these were going to be orange like the hems of her dress are, but it felt like a cop-out of the actual emoji, so I made them pink in the final piece. She's got some almost Victoriana puff sleeves that taper off with a bow into more straight sleeve style, with some cuffs at the end for those naval style influences. Her dress ended up green because the blue I'd planned on didn't translate well into the CMYK canvas, and it being orange was just a little bit too much. So the green is a good grounding colour, and it matches both the oranges and the pink bows. Her shoes are pretty straightforward, Mary Jane's with bow decorations. They're just the archetypal cutesy girlish formal shoe to me. For her actual face, I wanted her to be very round with chubby cheeks for those circle shapes. Her spikes aren't too prominent because I didn't want her to actually seem sharp and scary. I gave her fins on the sides of her face to mimic ears, just because I wasn't sure her head shape wouldn't look odd without any ears. Her eyes are very round, and her eyelashes are pointed in a way that reminds me of fins, even if I'm not sure if they actually came across. She doesn't have a nose because, you know, she's a fish, and she has no hair or eyebrows either, because I refuse point blank to put hair on a fish. Deeply cursed. She also has webbing in between her fingers and fins on the sides of her shins. A side note, what do you call a fish furry? I guess it's an anthro. I keep getting a bunch of different answers on Google. The popular ones seem to either be scaly or fish sona, and I've gotta say I'm not a fan of fish sona. Where's the pun, the whimsy, the creativity? 1 out of 10 name, guys, come on, we can do better. I just did all of these as flat colours to keep it simple, and because I've realised that in all of my previous videos I've done my many lighting layers and shading, and as much as I love doing my lighting layers, you guys know I love my lighting layers, I don't necessarily want the expectation in every video to be doing complicated shading. So this is my official statement, coming out and saying once and for all, expect less of me. I want to be able to be lazy in the future, so we're establishing now that sometimes we will not be doing complicated fully shaded art pieces. Especially because one day I'd love to be able to do 2 videos a month, like one explaining illustrations and one character design video or something along those lines, instead of my current 1 video a month schedule. I know I'm really shooting for the stars with that goal, but I feel like if I lock myself in too early to always doing very large or lengthy drawings in my videos, then in future I won't have time to be able to do more than 1 video. You guys have been around for a while now. I think I've made enough videos at maximum effort now that I can settle into a nice 85% effort, right? That's how that works. Also, I've been moving while this video was in the works, so I didn't have the same amount of time to be doing full shading. Expect my full apology video in a week's time. For the background, I kept it pretty simple with it just being patterned, for it to feel less blank than it just being a block colour, but it's only like 5% more effort than a block colour. And with that, we're done with our first furry. Well, scaly, we're done with our first anthro. Here she is closer up. I actually really like how she turned out. I think she's really cute, and I think the somewhat pastel colour palette really suits her. I do feel like I could have pushed her fishiness further, because I'm not sure she's immediately obvious as a fish furry and not just an oddly coloured bald girl. But I'm not sure what I could have done to push it further either. I keep going back and forth on whether I think the background is fun and pop arty or really odd and out of place. So if it's bad, we're all just going to collectively pretend that it actually really goes and it perfectly complements her, okay? In fact, it might even be the best background I've ever drawn. Let me know what you guys think of her and what might be a good name for her, because I haven't given any of these guys names yet. And of course, if you're an actual furry watching, I am eagerly awaiting y'all's rating on these designs, and legitimately, if you guys have tips on how to improve the anthro stuff, I would appreciate the advice so much. Now that you've all had time to comment sharing my 10 out of 10 background with compliments, let's get into our second design, shall we? Alright, so it's been a while in between filming these sections for me, and I've changed locations and bought a microphone, so hopefully the audio doesn't sound too different. Our next set of emojis is a cowboy, a cow, stars, and some autumn leaves. So of course we're making this a cowgirl cow. I kind of struggled for a while with how to fit in the stars and the leaves, but especially the stars emoji. For a while I was thinking about making the stars just patterning on her clothes, but I wasn't very happy with that idea. So instead I made her be made out of stars and be a celestial cowgirl cow, with glowing star freckles. I chose to make her a Highland cow because objectively they're the cutest cow, and I thought that how hairy they were probably would translate well into being humanoid. I mean, they've already got fringes. Though maybe I should have made her a buffalo, considering she's a cowgirl and they're very American. Although I'm not actually sure if they count as cows or if they're in a different animal family saying that. For her pose, I wanted her to be floating in the sky, but I really couldn't draw her legs in the first pose I sketched. It just wasn't happening. I don't understand how you furries draw digitigrade legs like it's easy. I've drawn them before, but only in very simple poses or angles, or by referencing someone else's art of digitigrade legs. How do you guys do it? Tell me your secrets. Also, while you're at it, how do you make hooves look good? Because I feel like mine here are awkwardly flat or stubby. Maybe it's just because I struggled with her legs so much that I'm biased against them, but I feel like her legs look cut off awkwardly more than anything. Should I have angled them so that they end in a slant? Legitimate question. Anyway, I gave up on that pose because it was too hard and I just did a simpler one instead, because this is the medium effort video. We are making decisions not based on just payoff but by convenience, and figuring out angled digitigrade legs was so hard I just gave up. Sidebar rant here, because I don't know where else in the video to bring this up, but it is something I want to talk about. The hatred towards furries is just so strange. Like I get it, when I was 13 and terrified of being cringe, I also hated them. But whenever I see like grown adults get legit mad about costumes, it's so bizarre. Pretty much all of the content I see furries post is so chill and cute. It's just a not even that weird form of self-expression. The community always seems so nice. Like, I'm certain it probably has a ton of drama, you know, if you're in it, because that's just how any community works. But as far as internet spaces go, they seem pretty normal. Also, the line between what weirds people out and is cringe and what's normal or cute seems to be entirely based on whether or not you use the word furry. Everyone loves Robin Hood, but this is cringe and weird. Like, legitimately, what is the actual difference between a D&D tabaxi and drawing a cat furry? The heat I see particularly in the art community for it is so odd to me, because like, in all likelihood you've probably drawn something that could be described as a furry. I definitely have, because anthropomorphic animals are a cornerstone of character design and animation at this point. Also, like I said, tons of D&D creatures are just straight up furries, but no one ever seems to have a problem drawing those. I don't know, also there's like so many jokes I see in the art community, which are basically, ew, I don't want to draw furries, that's gross. They pay lots. Done. And maybe some of those can be funny, but there's just so many that are the same joke now, and I can't help but wonder how a potential furry customers must feel when they're being treated as a moral compromise that's icky by the art space. As if drawing cat ears is some huge burden they have to lower themselves in order to do. Like, it's not that serious, but it just seems kind of rude and unprofessional. At the end of the day, if you are an artist who takes commissions, you are being employed to do a service. No one's making you do it. And as silly as we all like to be online, I don't know, it It just doesn't sit right with me on like a basic politeness or like a professional level. Okay, so I ended up cutting out a whole rant about cringe culture in the art community, and how I think that hurts artist and commissioner relationships and creativity here, because I don't mean to be getting serious in the middle of this video, so out she went. Long story short, there's just so much shaming in the online art community, and it feels very unprofessional, and frankly unconducive to an environment for creativity or learning, especially for beginner artists. Furry jokes are symptomatic of a much larger problem, you know? Anyways, discussion sidebar over, let's get back into the drawing. Sloth being mad about the online art community's culture hours over. I don't want it to take over too much more of this video, you know? Back to our Cowgirl design. Her shapes are circles and rectangles, reliable and strong, but still cute. All of the furry art I tend to enjoy is always very cute, so that's something I wanted to have in my own ones. For her clothes, I leant really hard into the cowboy aspect. I was this close to giving her chaps. All of her clothes are autumnal colours because of our autumn leaf emoji. I gave her a cream button-up shirt with those cowboy shoulder pad things with tassels. I have no idea what they're called, I'm sure they have a proper name. Throughout her design she has leaf patterning, her ascot is 2 pretty large leaves, and she has leaf embroidery on her elbows and thigh. Her star theming is mostly on her fur, but I also included some embroidered stars inside the split of her flare jeans. I also made her earring tag that farmer cows have be a star. Of course she has to have a big old belt, because that just feels very cowboy to me. And she has a cute little hat too, though in the actual drawing she's just holding it rather than wearing it. For her body she has horns, fluffy ears, digital grade legs, hooves and a tail to make her feel properly animal-like. I wanted her to feel like she was made of galaxy. I was tempted to make her somewhat see-through and have a galaxy pattern all over, but I resisted that urge. I am keeping my word, medium level effort video after my behemoth last two. I just gotta keep it in mind, you know? Little mantra. Instead I just dotted her in stars all over, made them glow using Gaussian blur, and an ad layer. I made her cheek blush lighter than her fur, unlike what I would usually do, because I thought it might help with the impression that she's glowing from the inside out. Let me know if it actually accomplishes that. I gave her darker fingers than the rest of her hand, because I wanted them to sort of look like hooves in that regard, but I ended up giving her fingernails on habit, and I'm not sure if that breaks that impression. Furries, let me know if I shouldn't have given her nails, it feels like I shouldn't have. Of course she had to have the Highland Cow signature curly fringe. Though I didn't want it to cover both of her eyes, I kept her hair short so it doesn't disrupt her silhouette too. For her face I made it round and cute with little fur tufts being thicker in her cheeks. I gave her some very long fluffy eyelashes to match her cow and a nose like a Highland cow too. I also made her pupils shaped like a star, her eyes are downturned to make her seem serene and peaceful. I ended up doing some lighting effects with her. I know. The point of them being flats was not doing my lighting effects, but I think it's a free pass because all I did was go over the colours with a soft airbrush and set the layer to colour dodge to make her actually glow. I made her background just be dark blues and be the night sky, so nothing too complicated there. And I think we're done with our cowgirl. Here she is up close. I think I'm happy with her. I like all of her shapes, but I'm unsure if the colours I chose for her fur and her clothes complement each other nicely or if they feel like they belong in different art pieces. I do like the actual design itself though. I think it's a really fun design and I like her cute little cowgirl getup. I much prefer her background to the Pufferfish girls ones too. I just think it blends better. Also not related to the actual design or anything, but I am well chuffed with that hand that's reaching out. It's shaped in a way that really tickles my brain. Obviously, like with our last girl, feel free to give her a name. And with that, let's get into our last design of the video. Our next set of emojis was a circus tent, a dragon, an anchor, and a pirate flag. So I thought it'd be fun if they were a circus acrobat / jester turned pirate. Obviously they have to be a dragon scaly. I decided to incorporate the anchor by making our dragon be using it for a trick pose. The only problem with it is that it became the bane of my existence. I compared Pufferfish Girl to Rupert far too early. This was far closer. Actually, no, this was worse than Rupert's arm. This design alone was why this video was so delayed coming out to begin with, because this was supposed to come out before I moved. Then, you know, moving happened, and then I needed to focus on making my portfolio, and now it's been like, what, 5 months? I'm not sure. I'm writing this part of the script in late May, so we'll wait and see just how delayed this was. I started designing these guys back in December. I completed the Cowgirl and the Fish Girl art pieces in February. There was a delay in between those two things because you know how moving goes. I did not finish the dragon until the end of March. I don't know why I decided doing an exaggerated acrobat pose with an overly long body type with digitigrade legs and a hand pointing towards the camera would be a good idea, or you know, a tool low effort. But here we are, because I am physically incapable of making medium effort art. So the idea with this character was that I wanted them to be kind of creepy and playful looking, so I made their shapes triangles and decided to give them uncanny valley long limbs to almost make them feel snake-like. The downside of that is that angular shapes are always much less forgiving to draw, especially when put into perspective, and making an unrealistically proportioned character feel anatomically correct in odd poses is a severe challenge. I also chose possibly the worst angle to draw dragon faces at. Anyone who's ever drawn a dragon before can tell you, just draw them at side profile, because front-facing dragon faces are more often than not incredibly silly looking. But for whatever reason, despite knowing this, I still chose to make them face mostly frontwards. Because I hate myself, evidently. I had a bugger of a time adapting this design to this pose as well. Since it's so scrunched up in some places and really clear in others, finding a design that felt appropriately balanced in this pose was very difficult. This kind of stuff isn't a big deal for character designs you draw more than once. All designs are going to have some poses that offset the balance or the silhouette. It's just how it goes. But for these kinds of videos where I'm only ever going to draw these guys once in one pose, I want them to look at their best in that particular pose. It just constantly felt too busy and distracting, and in the end the design I went with feels overly plain. I gave them a large jester hat for those large triangle shapes. For the whimsy it ends in 2 bells, and the colour is split, so half of it is red and half of it is black. I do worry that this half and half split with red and black, while very classic jester, reads very Harley Quinn-ish, but what can you do? They have a big old ruff because I was really going for ye old jester energy for them, but I feel like the ruff ended up contributing to making this piece harder, since it had to be quite detailed by nature, and it also was partially obscured by the outstretching hand. They have a little tunic and a leotard with a chunky pirate belt, and for good measure, a second smaller belt, because what's more piratey than more belts? Their tunic ends, like much of their design does, in triangular segments, with small bells attached to the points. Their leotard, hat and tunic all have some crisscross diamond patterning for some jester flair. For the pirate elements they of course had to have an eye patch, a shirt with some very loose and frilly sleeves, and some big old boots. Though I did make sure to give their boots plenty of bells too. They can simply never do a stealth attack. They've got some mismatching fingerless gloves because that just felt like a piratey touch to me, even though I'm sure there's no real historical precedent for that. Face-wise, I gave them some pointy cheek scales and spikes descending on their forehead. The main feature for their face is definitely their clown-style makeup, with white foundation and a red nose and cheeks, along with a black stripe over their eye. I had planned to give them a gold tooth, but their mouth ended up being covered completely by their hand. They've got a ridiculously long tail to really help make them snake-like, and I looped it through the anchor like how you would rope. Along it has a bunch of spikes for our triangle shape and to add interest. I definitely placed it in the wrong spot though. I made it pretty wide to balance out how long it was, but as a consequence it just fits really odd on their back. But I'm gonna be honest, at a certain point this piece was just in the good enough school of thought. Prop-wise, they have an old-fashioned pirate gun pointed at the viewer. For their background, I just copied and pasted the water bubble background circle thing from our Fish Girl, since I was planning to do water for our dragon too, and there didn't seem like a point in drawing the same thing twice. And then of course we added in some random textures to help make the background feel more interesting. And with that, we're done with our dragon. Here they are all done. I don't think it's a surprise when I say this is definitely the design I'm least happy with. Honestly, this is a prompt I really like. A dragon jester pirate sounds so fun, and I'm sad I don't think I was able to really do it justice. Definitely a design I'd be willing to revamp in the future at some point. I might do a short video on that at some point, because I do really like designing pirates. Your boy does not have a pirate OC story for no reason. And Dragonborn are definitely something I want to make sure I can always do consistently well, and not just when they're at convenient angles. I did end up liking it more than I was expecting to when it was done, but I do think I'm gonna have to give them the title of officially my least favourite design on this channel nonetheless. Maybe you guys have different opinions though, so as always let me know in the comments. And with our dragon done, we're also done with this video. Here are all the designs for this video all lined up. Let me know which one turned out to be your favourite design and what names you think they should have. As much as I struggled with this video, I did have fun, mostly, and I think doing another video like it in the future would be fun. Like I said, I am quite tempted to do a short video at some point redoing my dragon, because I really do feel like I can do a better job on that, but I didn't want to delay this video any more than it already was. If I do decide to do that, it'll probably be after a couple of unrelated videos that I've already got in the works. Housekeeping point here. Keen-eyed viewers, or any of you who have been on my channel before, might notice that I've changed my formatting a bit during my speed paint sections. I used to use my sprite throughout the whole video, but I've switched to using an animated GIF during my speed paint instead. This was mostly to help cut back on editing time, since my sprites take a long time adding and make video editing much longer, which is obviously less than ideal, especially during busy periods of my life. I also noticed that a majority of you watch my videos on mobile, so I was a bit worried that the speed paint might be too small to see, so I made it show up larger during the animated GIF speed paint sections. The pro of my sprites is of course that they're more visually engaging, get my emotions across clearer, and I think help my videos feel more like we're having a conversation. Let me know which format you guys prefer. If you're all really against this new one, I'll figure out a way to do my old one quicker. Though by the time this comes out, I'll probably have a backlog of videos in this style, so it would still take a couple of videos before it returns to purely sprites. I do plan to continue using my sprites during non-speed paint sections, as you saw in this video, and in more discussion-based videos where the art doesn't take as long, so I can allocate more of the video's production time in just editing. I've also been considering putting up my non-phantom or story-based designs that I make for videos up for sale as adoptables, since I'll never draw them again, but I do put a lot of effort into designing them. I wouldn't put up these ones, or at least not the dragon in its current state, since I'm not particularly happy with that one. If I did put them up, it'll probably be after I've revamped that one. But let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in me doing in the future. Anyway, if you liked this video and want to see more like it, but don't want to rely on the homepage suggesting my stuff again, maybe subscribe and check out my other videos. It's been nice having you all around. I hope you drop by again.